Welcome to a special midweek edition of our show. With the draft lottery coming up, I just couldn't talk enough Lakers basketball. I've got Mark Medina in today to help break down the front office shakeup that is continuing, as well as to look at the different scenarios in the draft lottery. Let's get to it. My name is Trevor Lane, and this is the Lakers Nation podcast. Today I've got Mark Medina of the Southern California News Group and the We Want Tacos podcast joining us. Mark, thanks so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always a fun time.
Hey, this is a very tense time for Lakers fans. We've got the draft lottery coming up, but some news came out this week that the Lakers have been making some more changes to their front office. Did you see all the stuff coming out about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this has been kind of the theme since the season ended, where Magic Johnson, the new president of basketball operations of the Lakers, and Rob Pelinka, the general manager, were mentioning that they're going to be evaluating everyone from top to bottom. And, the headliners are obviously the players and what they do with them, but they basically meant everyone in the organization. And, some of the changes don't necessarily reflect that respective person did a bad job, but typically whenever there is a new boss on board, they like to bring their own people that have their own vision, they have previous relationships with. But no doubt it's been a lot. I mean, Lakers assistant general manager Glenn Carraro resigned. So did the strength and conditioning coach Tim DeFrancesco.
Right.
And then there were a lot of changes that were made as what the Lakers called part of the reorganization of basketball operations. So the assistant strength and conditioning coach Sean Light's not with the team. As you mentioned, they changed their analytics department with Yuji Lee, him stepping down. And I wouldn't be surprised if there would be more to come. But that's kind of what we expected, knowing that there would be new guys in charge.
Well, all these people that are resigning, are these kind of resignations where they're really being kind of pushed out, do you think, or is this more just there's changes being made and people are just looking for opportunities elsewhere? What's your feel on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the ones that were specifically said, part of reorganization of basketball operations, those people were let go.
Right.
They didn't go into great detail, but they made changes because they felt like they wanted another person in place. Specifically, Glenn Carraro and Tim DeFrancesco. It's my understanding that they both resigned, and it was something that both parties mutually agreed upon, and that sort of thing. And I think that both Tim and Glenn are certainly open to other opportunities, and also looking forward to spending some time with their family. But no doubt that definitely coincided with all these different changes. But I the sense I got with Tim specifically, I know when his resignation happened, you can't help but kind of read between the lines of, Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are telling the players, hey, they need to improve their conditioning, they need to improve their body fat, but the Lakers explicitly told me that had nothing to do with the reason that Tim is not with the organization anymore.
Yeah, it seemed like he had a pretty good reputation, not just with the Lakers, but also around the league. So it was a little bit of a surprise that Tim DeFrancesco in particular was leaving. But I'm sure Magic Johnson will have somebody else in mind that he's gonna put in place that's gonna do a phenomenal job for them. Have you heard about any names that could be getting tossed around or anything?
I have not, and there's frankly a possibility that some of these positions, not specifically Tim's, but just in general, they may not be necessarily filled. They may evolve certain people's roles within the organization. They might make a combination of also hiring people. That part isn't clear, but I think that you're going to continue to hear, other names of guys being let go or resigned, and that's kind of all under the scope of what we were talking about, where they're kind of making changes from top to bottom, and certainly we'll myself and other people that cover the team hopefully get clarity and answers from Magic and Rob on what exactly their role is. But again, I think this was kind of to be expected, just knowing that they're new and that they're looking to bring some guys on board that they already have relationships with, or they feel more comfortable aligning with what their vision is.
And that's kind of to be expected when you have a new regime coming in. Now before we move on to talking about the draft lottery, one question that I did have with all this is, the analytics department and the changes there. For a long time, the Lakers have been known as that franchise that has been a little bit behind the times in terms of analytics. Do you get a sense that the new regime behind Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka is going to be improving in that area, or is it going to be more of the same?
I would suspect so, because their whole rhetoric has always been trying to maximize, what they quote unquote say the pursuit of excellence in every department of the organization. And in fairness to the Lakers, I know compared to a lot of other teams around the league, they certainly weren't seen as being the most innovative franchise. But I think once Luke Walton was hired, and once the Lakers had some initial criticisms under the first year of previous head coach Byron Scott, they had made some inroads in beefing up their analytics department with making some additional hires with Yuju Lee, or promoting him, and then hiring Lorena Martin, making Clay Moser, kind of the liaison between the analytics department and the basketball staff. And then you look at Luke Walton himself. He comes from a background with Golden State, which, besides the fact they had a lot of talent and still have a lot of talent, that they use analytics a lot in different things that really, help make them feel like they're adapting to all the different trends going on in the NBA and maximize different players. So I think that initiative has certainly already been in place. But I know that Magic and Rob have also talked about trying to do even more. So that shouldn't be surprising at all.
So they're not really, completely revamping the analytics department. Well, they may be bringing in new people, but really they're just putting a little bit more emphasis on it, or continuing on the path they're already on, just pushing down on the gas pedal a little bit harder.
They certainly could be revamping, but it's not like it's a 360-degree turn. I think it's more of continuing to try to seize momentum and, kind of have a snowball effect, so to speak. But, when we were talking about all these changes, and I was saying, hey, this is to be expected, certainly true. But I think, the verdict is out on to what degree any changes are going to be made, both for better or for worse, obviously, because we don't see how this is playing out in real time. So I think the hope for the Lakers is you take advantage of people that you have in the organization that can bring value, and they have a lot of institutional knowledge that is good and a lot of insight, but you also don't want to, settle on those laurels, so to speak. And you can make the argument that is one of the things that, contributed to some of the Lakers' struggles, but at the same time, you do want to take advantage of that vast history and resources. So we don't know to what degree they'll be able to, keep that balance between the two, but we'll certainly find out next season.
Well, yeah, that's a great point, because in the past the Lakers have been accused of being that team that kind of rests on the whole notion that, hey, we're the Lakers, people should want to come play for us. And it seems like Rob Pelinka has been pushing back against that, saying, no, we can't fall back on that. We can't let ourselves become complacent. It's great that we have this history, and of course we want to utilize it, but at the same time, we have to push forward into the future, and we have to give players a reason to come to LA beyond just, hey, we're the Lakers, you should want to come play for us, right?
Exactly. But then on the other side, it is a little bit apples and oranges, but kind of to illustrate an example, after Phil Jackson stepped down as the Lakers coach and said he's basically done with coaching, as you know, there's a lot of changes, not just with the head coach, but a lot of trainers, a lot of people were let go because of the lockout. And then there was always a feeling around people with Phil Jackson, and I certainly think that Jeannie Buss shares a sentiment that she felt that Jim Buss made a lot of moves that kind of purged themselves of any influence of Phil Jackson when you're looking at any of the trainers and behind the scenes people. And I certainly think that there's a danger of, making a purge just for the sake of doing it. So too early to say to what degree either any of these moves fall on that scale, but we'll certainly again have clarity next season.
Right, and hopefully these are moves for the better, but we won't really know until they get into it. Now, obviously, this is a big week here for the Los Angeles Lakers. We know the draft lottery is coming up on Tuesday the 16th. And I mean, I'm already on pins and needles about it. I know a lot of fans are. This is going to be. I mean, there's so much riding on this, right? We've got not just one pick at stake here, but two picks, because if the Lakers keep their draft pick on Tuesday in the draft lottery, if they falls in the top three, then they also get their 2019 first rounder back from the Orlando Magic. Of course, they would have to send their 2017 second rounder and 2018 second rounder to Orlando instead, but that's a swap that any GM in the league would gladly make. So let's run through some scenarios here of possible outcomes of the draft lottery, and I'm curious to get your take on kind of what the Lakers' game plan would be moving forward. GM Rob Pelinka has said that they have an attack plan regardless of what the outcome is. So maybe we can kind of spitball here and figure out what the Lakers' strategy might be.
Yeah, I think to your point, obviously, like every organization is supposed to have a plan B. If you don't have a plan B, your organization is probably in trouble. So It shouldn't be surprising, when Rob is saying, hey, we've put all together all these different contingency plans in case either scenario happens. But his main overall point is that he thinks that they're going to be able to make the best of all circumstances. But I think objectively speaking, if they do not get this top 3 pick, they're in huge trouble in terms of their ability to accelerate the rebuilding. And here's why. It cuts to actually 3 ways. A, you get the top pick. You obviously can incorporate not only a young player, but a guy who arguably could be the next face of the Lakers franchise because of the talent pool in this draft class and the fact that the Lakers don't really have clarity on this young core, and I wouldn't say optimism, but there's not a sense of we know player X is going to be special and we need to build around him. I don't think that's the feeling that the Lakers have. They like the young core generally because they're young and they have talent, but they're also young and have a lot of inexperience and make a lot of mistakes. And so if they get this pick, it gives them flexibility to either do 2 things. They can use that to select a guy, obviously in the draft, or they could use that as a bargaining chip in a trade, maybe trying to get someone like Paul George. Now, if they don't, they're obviously going to have to include more than just the lottery pick. But if they decide to go the route where they use that pick to get one of the guys in the draft, I think that gives them more comfort in getting rid of some of their young players.
Right.
Now, all that being said, I think Magic and Rob have made it perfectly clear. They don't see any of these guys on the team as untouchable. Kobe Bryant's not on the team anymore, so it's not like any team that calls and says, hey, what do you want for so-and-so, that they're going to just laugh and hang up. But I think that gives them more flexibility and comfort of knowing, hey, we know this player is coming in. We can, part ways with another player. And so I think when you read between the lines in the hypothetical that they get this top 3 pick and they presumably use it on a point guard like a Fultz or Alonzo Ball, that naturally enhances the odds that they would feel comfortable parting ways with either D'Angelo Russell, Jordan Clarkson, maybe even both, depending on what the deal is. If they don't get the pick, I think that increases the odds that the young core in its entirety stays together. Because I don't think the Lakers are of the mind that as much as they like Paul George and they want to be aggressive in any trades and they're going to do whatever they can to get someone in free agency with getting a meeting down, I don't think it's realistic for either scenario to happen. And so for the trade, why I'm skeptical with that is even though these guys are not considered untouchable. I don't think they want to sell the farm just for the sake of getting a guy without any infrastructure. That's kind of what the problems the Lakers had before, where they had an injured Kobe Bryant and guys on expiring deals and not much really to build around them. And that really kind of set them back. And then on top of that, if they do that and they get into a meeting with a free agent, they don't really have much to sell. But at the same notion, they keep these young guys and they get a meeting with some of these top free agents. You look at, just free agent behavior. They want to go to a team that they know that they can win right away. I mean, LeBron James went to the Miami Heat because he thought, hey, they're going to get to the NBA Finals. As soon as they arrive, they can compete for a championship. Obviously, they didn't win the Finals the first year, but they're in the Finals. They won the year after that. Same thing with why Kevin Durant's leaving the Thunder to go to the Warriors. It looks like they're well on their way to getting to that championship series. So I think it's basically the main building block of this rebuild. And obviously, if they don't get it, it's going to slow down that process. But I think to what Rob and Magic's point is, they're trying to be optimistic and saying it's not the end of the world because they still have a foundation to build on, and they're going to try to be aggressive in every place else of, adding some second tier guys, hitting some singles and doubles. But, I don't see any scenario where they're going to make the playoffs or anything unless they keep this top 3 pick.
Yeah, this is it's such an all or nothing day for the Lakers with the draft lottery, and it's certainly going to be a tense moment, and they kind of have to say that there's a contingency plan, that they've got a plan of attack moving forward, that no matter what, they've got pieces to build on. They have to spin it in a positive way because they can't just come out and say, hey, if we don't get this pick, we're in big trouble.
We're done. Let's throw in the towel right now.
Right. They really can't say that. But of course, we know that when Magic Johnson is on that stage, if they don't get the pick, like inside, I just imagine he's going to be screaming. Right.
I'm sure he would, and he's an expressive guy, so I'm sure if they keep the pick, he's going to be smiling like he always does.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe jumping up for joy, and if they don't, he's a competitive guy, so I'm sure he'll definitely show his emotions on his sleeve. So it'll be interesting to see. And to your point about them being optimistic, I think it cuts, 3 ways. Obviously, they have season ticket holders, and, the programmers at Spectrum Sports Center, they want them to be, somewhat excited about, hey, at least we're showing some product out there that could be exciting. They want to, talk to the fan base and giving them a reason to be interested in the team. But I think it's also a message to the guys that are on the team that, like, look, we want to get this pick, but we have some confidence in you that you'll be able to develop from within, and that's part of the rebuild. And certainly that cuts both ways regardless of whether they keep the pick. But again, to my original point, this pick only accelerates the rebuilding because of all the different implications that follow.
So let's say that the worst happens, and it's most likely going to happen because we know that they only have a 47% chance to keep their pick, 46.9% chance to keep their pick. So it's actually more likely that they lose the pick. So let's say that happens, and Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka probably spend the evening cursing the basketball gods and shouting to the heavens. But the next morning, the sun rises, and they look at the assets that they have. They know that they're going to have their second round pick this year and then next year. They'll lose this year's first rounder. They'll lose their 2019 first rounder. Do you think they'll be able to pull anything off with the assets that they do have in terms of trades or free agent signings or anything like that? Or will they just kind of try to run back what they had from the previous year?
Well, I think to what Rob's point is, they're going to still make phone calls because of the sense that, you don't get a deal without making a call. So they'll certainly keep doing that, and it seems like in their nature to be aggressive. But I think the immediate contingency plan is they'll focus on, making those calls, seeing what's out there just for the sake of doing that, and then, focus getting on some of those draft workouts for that late first round pick that they have for Houston, the second round pick that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then third, I think they'll certainly try to get whatever meetings they can with free agency. And, the sense that I get is they'll have a good chance of getting meetings, but that might not necessarily mean that they'll come to the Lakers. Obviously it was a bad sign that Kevin Durant would even give them a meeting because of where they were. But there were times, in previous years, well before that, where, they were getting meetings, but there's a lot of people around the league that thought that some of those guys were frankly just using the Lakers as leverage. They're always going to be a team that sits at the table because of who they are, and they're in LA and all that, but they're not quite at the table where they're at the head seat, so to speak. So I think they'll still be able to get meetings because of the newness of it all, with Magic and Pelinka being there, it being the Lakers. But I don't think it's enough because of where the team's at for them to suddenly get a marquee guy. But I think that's where the focus will be on, hey, let's focus on hitting some singles, hitting some doubles, getting some good second-tier guys to complement the young core. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They won't have that superstar, but that gives them an even stronger infrastructure for maybe next season, where their hope is obviously that they improve their win total. Maybe they're able to get, maybe not necessarily in the playoffs, but closer to that. So then the next year they can then sell to these guys with higher talent, or, when the trade deadline comes, that look, Paul George, if you're unhappy and not with another team by that point, you'll be able to come here without us selling the farm. But I think with Paul specifically, I think where that gets complicated is he wants to be with the Lakers. The Lakers want him here. But if Indiana gets to the point where they feel like, there's no way we can keep him, we got to get some value out of that, they're not going to be exactly waiting on the Lakers' timeline for that to work. They'll see what else is out there. So that's where it all gets. It'll get very challenging to see what the Lakers do.
Yeah, and the concern for the Lakers obviously would be that he goes to someplace like, say, Boston or something like that.
Especially Boston.
Right, and then he gets there and they're contending in the Eastern Conference, and then he decides to stay. I mean, that's obviously the fear, and that would be the motivating factor that would be getting the Lakers to try to trade for a guy like Paul George now. But like you were saying, if they don't keep this pick, they probably don't have the pieces to really put around a Paul George. So then potentially you're risking him walking away after a year with the Lakers after you give up assets to get him. So it's a tough balancing act to negotiate this kind of a trade.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, obviously the Lakers are going to have to try to see how well they can navigate their balancing act, but to some degree, some of the circumstances are beyond their control, in the sense that they're still going to be experiencing some of the consequences of what the Lakers have gone through in the past few years. And you brought up Boston. I remember, the 2013-14 season, where I did a compare and contrast of the rebuilding direction that the Celtics and the Lakers were going through. And at the time, I was talking to Steve Kerr, who was then an analyst for TNT, and a lot of people around the league, and they looked at that as a prime example of, hey, this is how one team should be doing the rebuild, where the Celtics made some tough decisions in parting ways with their big three, with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, and they got some value in draft picks, and obviously Brooklyn is still the gift that keeps on giving. Right. And they invested in some young players, and they drafted well, and they hired a young up and coming coach with Brad Stevens, and then he looked at the Lakers, where it was almost the opposite, where they extended Kobe Bryant's career, and obviously there's a lot of positives with that because of what he meant to the organization and certainly from a financial standpoint, but it also created a lot of challenges of how do you build around a team like that because of the salary number that Kobe was making with 2 years, $48.5 on his deal million, and the fact that he was hurt, and you have an injured Steve Nash, and you have Pau Gasol, who wasn't obviously seen eye to eye with Mike D'Antoni, and then you had a bunch of guys on one-year deals on expiring contracts, and on one hand that made sense where it gave the Lakers cap flexibility, but it also created an uncomfortable dynamic because all these guys expired at the same time. And so when they got into meetings with Carmelo Anthony, they didn't really have, an infrastructure to sell them. And then during the season, when you have guys on one-year deals, the positive of that is, they have motivation, obviously, to try hard and play well. But is it for the right reasons? Are they trying to pad their stats? And
Right.
the sense that I got during that time is they had the right intentions, but you can't help but think human nature eventually kicks in. And also, when you're having a team of one-year guys, you don't really feel like there's much of an investment. There's much of a sense of continuity. Everyone's just here on rental flyers, and you're trying to get adjusted, and you don't know where you stand in the organization, how much you're valued. And I think because of all those things, a lot of people around the league are looking at Boston as, obviously rebuilding the right way. And that was said 4 years ago, and obviously you can see right now the direction they took obviously yielded much better results.
Yeah, it definitely has. And of course, for the Lakers, the concern now is that Boston is this big threat to use some of these assets that they have to go in and land a piece that the Lakers want. And it's going to be an interesting summer, that's for sure, to see how this all shakes out, because it's a very tough game to gauge all this free agent and trade activity, and Rob Pelinka and Magic Johnson don't have a ton of experience, so we're gonna have to. They're gonna get thrown into the fire a little bit, and these moves that they make this summer are what's gonna set the team on the path for the future. So we'll see how they navigate this whole situation.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we saw a little bit, this season just how they operate, where Magic. Before the trade deadline, made moves where they obviously saw value in trying to get a draft pick by trading Lou Williams, saw value in trying to get rid of a veteran player who is productive for the sake of allowing the younger guys to develop more, and frankly, to maximize their odds of getting this pick. And I think that that's something the Lakers wanted to have.
Just didn't quite work out the way they planned.
Right, exactly. In terms of just setting themselves up, and obviously they won a bunch of games at the end, so we'll see if that messes them up. But then you also saw the synergy between Rob Pelinka, Magic Johnson, Jeannie Buss, and that's obviously something that was lacking for a lot of different reasons with Jeannie, with her brother, and Mitch Kupchak, but also with Luke Walton and the coaching staff and the players. And so far, the sense I get, it's obviously a positive thing right now, but I think this necessarily won't have much clarity, I think, at least until the season starts. Can they find that great balance of having that synergy, collaboration, having those relationships with Luke and the players without overstepping their bounds? And I know that Luke Walton is a team player, and he's a guy that the organization has loved so far, and he's been embracing the changes and trying to see the positive of that. But I think he's also of the mind that, he is hired to be the coach for a reason, and he would like it to stay that way. And, I know that Magic had said at that Lakers All Access event, I think shortly after his hire, he was saying, Luke's the coach, I'm not the coach. So that sounds encouraging. And so I don't think Magic's going to suddenly wanting to be on the sideline or calling plays. He realized a few decades ago he doesn't want to coach and didn't have success coaching. But he also is a competitive person. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. After they assemble the roster, presumably there's more expectations, and the emphasis will be obviously even heavier on results than on just developing guys.
Sure. Yeah. As the team grows, that's just going to be natural. Now let's envision a little bit brighter scenario here than them losing their pick. Let's say that the draft lottery results come out, and I'm of the mindset right now where I don't even care if it's 1, 2, or 3 at this point. Just keep the pick, right? If it comes out that the Lakers keep the pick, I'm happy. I'm probably doing laps around my house if they keep the pick. And probably waking up the baby, but I'll just be so excited that they kept the pick. It's that my wife will be mad at me, but it'll be okay because they kept the pick, and that's all that matters. And if that happens, we know Magic Johnson is going to be beaming. He's going to be smiling ear to ear on stage. He's going to be as excited as can be. And then the Lakers have an interesting choice, right? They're going to have some prospects available. They're going to have guys like potentially Lonzo Ball, Markelle Fultz, Josh Jackson, maybe Jason Tatum. They've got all these interesting prospects that they could end up selecting, or they could end up trading that pick. And I wanted to see if you have a sense if they are, I know it's early, but are they leaning more towards like moving it and getting win now pieces, or would they be more inclined to pick one of these young players and then continue to build?
I don't necessarily think it's like they're leaning one way or the other. They're going to make calls for the sake of the same reason why they're doing that with their young core. They see the lottery pick and the young players as assets, and they're not trying to get rid of it for the sake of either making a splash or doing the addition by subtraction mantra. But it doesn't mean that they're just going to hold on to it. So they say they get the pick, they're going to make calls with additional leverage to teams. Hey, this is what we can offer you. And frankly, that's when the calls are going to happen. I mean, I don't think that they're really talking to teams substantially about hypothetical deals, because both sides know, hey, this pick that you get is a huge chip. So if they get that pick, they're going to make calls. That doesn't mean they're leaning toward doing the deal or not. They frankly want to see what's out there. But again, I don't think it's going to get to the point where they're going to be selling the farm. But I think what will happen is they'll see what's out there, and if they're not able to negotiate something, they'll obviously be also evaluating these draft guys. So I know you were saying, just for your own sake, that doesn't necessarily matter what order they get the pick, but it does obviously matter what order of the pick they get.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Obviously in the trade, but who they select. I think if they get the number one pick, it would either be Lonzo Ball or Fultz. I don't know if it's definitive one way or the other, but I think that they really feel like those guys are the most talented. They would love to have a point guard. They like D'Angelo Russell, but they don't really know if he's a point guard or a shooting guard. It seems like they think he's more of an off-ball guard. And also, to my point earlier, they liked his play. They liked his growth. They were impressed with the fact that he was able to have a string of good games after the All-Star break. But they're very mindful that he's inconsistent. And they're also very mindful of the fact that they don't know if they see him as the leader of the franchise. I mean, to D'Angelo's credit, he had even admitted after his exit meeting that he frankly didn't really sense that he got a lot of the respect from the guys because he didn't really build the credibility to lead. And that was something that the Lakers front office told him to work on, his leadership, and then the same things that they basically harped everyone else, the conditioning, and then certain things about his play. But if they do get like the third pick, I don't think those guys are going to be available. So you look at a Josh Jackson. Obviously, it's a different position. The way that was explained to me, he can basically play the 2 and the 3. He's a two-way player, a good defender. So I think that lessens the odds that they would feel comfortable dangling any combination of D'Angelo and or Jordan Clarkson because they need guys in the backcourt. But does that mean that they shift Brandon Ingram's position? Does that mean that they may feel more comfortable in including him? They really like him, and they were mentioning a lot of the players and the coaching staff that they really pinpointed him and Ivica Zubac as the guys that they thought had the most growth, the most long-term trajectory. And I know that we're going down a path because in our previous podcast we had made this point, and all these D'Angelo Russell fans were getting on us on Twitter about it. Right. But again, it's not that they think that either of those guys are more talented than D'Angelo. They think he is the most talented, and then probably Julius Randle. But they're, it kind of cuts both ways, where they also felt like D'Angelo and Julius were the most inconsistent, and where they saw their progress kind of show peaks and valleys and come in waves, where with Brandon and Ivica, they're by no means a finished product, and they didn't necessarily post great numbers, but you saw the growth steadily and slowly but surely go up, up, and up. And so because of that, they think long term, they're going to have more upside. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean anyone's untouchable. So that's where all these different dominoes and all these different contingency things get complicated. And that explains why Rob and Magic have stressed, hey, we have outlined all these different hypotheticals and the 5-year plan of, what each free agent's value could be and how they fit into our team, all within the scope of their hope of accelerating the rebuild to obviously get back into contention and to give Luke Walton the right pieces to coach. So a lot of complicated variables indeed, but I think generally speaking, that's how I would see it play out if they keep that pick.
Yeah, there's so many different ways it could go, and and you're right. There is a difference between 1, 2, and 3. That's if they end up with 3 and they don't end up drafting a guard, that shifts things completely. Maybe they're more likely to make a trade there. You can just go around and around and around with all these different scenarios of well, if this happens, then maybe this will take place, and they can go this way and everything. And this is all stuff that Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka are gonna have to figure out. And certainly evaluating their assets for trades is going to be a big part of that too, as they're figuring out which pick they could have and who they could add in and all that kind of stuff. As you said, if they draft a guard, maybe that makes D'Angelo Russell or Jordan Clarkson a little more available. Maybe they keep everybody. It kind of depends on what offers are out there. But I was curious to see if you had a feel on this. In the Lakers' mind, if you were to rank their assets, draft pick aside, the players they already have on the team, do you get a sense for who they value over anybody else?
That's a very tough question to answer because I think from a trade standpoint, again, it goes back to the fact that they don't see any of these guys as untouchable. But I think from a basketball standpoint, it again goes back to what I was saying. They see Ingram and Zubats with the most long-term upside. They see D'Angelo and Julius as the most talented right now, but as they had stressed in their exit meeting, as both players to a man and have admitted, they needed to improve their consistency. I think that they look at Jordan Clarkson in two veins. I think that they're mindful that some of his early season struggles had to do with the fact that he was trying to adapt playing with Lou Williams, where Lou Williams is a ball-dominant guard and a high-volume shooter. And, in Lou's defense, he was very efficient this season, so he was justified in doing that. But Jordan was trying to figure out, okay, what do I do from here? And he is a hard worker. He doesn't complain publicly, but I think that there was a genuine maybe frustration is strong of a term. No, I would say there's probably a frustration of, where does he fit in the mix? If I pass the ball, am I going to get it back? But they kept reiterating to him, focus on his defense, focus on not having tunnel vision. And that cut both ways of don't always look to pass, don't always look to score. Like, be mindful of reading defensive coverages. And you saw the numbers when they traded Lou Williams. Jordan was very comfortable, a lot more efficient, very aggressive, but
he was night and day.
Yeah, and I know that Rob has said other things publicly, but I don't sense that they think D'Angelo Russell and Jordan Clarkson are a good pairing together, and that explains why they rarely played together until the end of the season. And by that point, Luke Walton was frankly just experimenting with things. But they see Jordan as a hard worker. They don't know if he's going to be, just a role player, six-man, or he could evolve into something more. But they do like that he works. But it's a matter of, working on those right things and continuing to develop good habits. Larry Nance Jr., they love him as a guy that you want on a team. Obviously, the dunks and the athleticism speaks for itself. They don't know to what degree he'll, emerge as a stretch four or a jump shooter. But they want him to have that as a tool. They want his bread and butter to be that energy guy and to be one of those good leaders. Now, I don't think he'll ever be like the face of the team, but you saw in other years, like a Derek Fisher, where he was able to be kind of a co-captain with Kobe because of his work ethic, because he brought something to the table, and he is a very mature and good locker room guy. All that being said, they're not sure what his upside is. Maybe it's what he is now. But again, all these guys, you can't stress enough, they're not the finished product because they're young, but you obviously want to try to also have some kind of insight of clairvoyance of, hey, we think this guy could be this guy at some point. So that's kind of the early reads on all those guys. But when it comes to, which guys have the most trade value, hard to say at this point. Because again, they don't see any of them as untouchable.
And it kind of depends on the buyer too.
Yeah,
right?
it certainly depends on the buyer for sure.
Yeah. I mean, depending on which team is going after them, that can definitely swing things quite a bit. I mean, heck, we saw with the Sacramento Kings, they valued Buddy Hield very, very highly, enough to give up DeMarcus Cousins to get him and a pick, whereas most teams in the league probably wouldn't have made that swap. So it really kind of depends on which team is offering and all that. But it's always interesting to talk about how you would rank the Lakers players and all that stuff, because we have seen them grow and develop over the last few seasons, and of course we all want them to turn into superstars and all that, but it's going to be on Magic and Rob Pelinka to figure out who are the pieces that they want to hang on to, and then which are the ones that they can part with, and certainly what's being offered for them plays a big role in that.
Right. And I should add one thing, and this shouldn't necessarily contradict what I was saying, but it's an added wrinkle. There is something to be said, the fact that they did not trade Brandon Ingram when they were trying to see if they could get DeMarcus Cousins in that deal. So again, that is all like circumstantial type of things, but there is something to be said for that.
Yeah, it does show that they do value Ingram pretty highly, because if they didn't think that highly of him, then maybe they would have shipped him out. Of course, we don't know if Sacramento was asking for other pieces in addition to Ingram and everything, but still, yeah, the fact that they hung on to him and that whole Cousins situation is definitely telling. Now, before we get out of here, I've been going back and forth on these lottery scenarios. I've probably played the draft lottery simulation on ESPN way too many times than I should have. I've even bounced between ESPN and Tankathon just to see if one site somehow gives me better luck than the other one. Mark,
man, you must be driving your household crazy, man.
Oh yeah, definitely. Give me your prediction. I know it's almost impossible because it's a coin flip, but what do you think happens on draft lottery night? Do the Lakers keep their pick, or are we going to be shedding some tears?
I think at the end of the day, the Lakers will keep it. I don't think they're going to move up. I think they'll end at number 3. And the reason why, I don't think they'll lose it because it is a coin flip. I could be wrong, but I just feel like they've had that string of good fortune in the lottery already. Like, at some point it has to end, but I think it'll still continue. But I don't think it's going to be good enough where they can move up, because they moved up 2 spots 2 years ago, and I felt like that luck ran its course, where they had the 4th best record and they moved up to or 4th worst record, moved up to number 2. Last year they stayed put, so I think it'll basically be the same thing. Last year they had the 2nd worst record in the NBA, got the 2nd pick. This year they had the 3rd worst record in the NBA, so I think they'll get the 3rd pick. But that being said, like, it is just under a coin flip, and it really could go either way. I mean, they could get number 1. It's a 15.6% chance of it happening, but it very well could happen. Or it could be misery. I mean, that's the thing that, I know it's stressing you out, but it also kind of makes it exciting to see how that unfolds. And I know being at the lottery the last few years, just seeing the relief and joy, there's probably more relief on Mitch Kupchak last year and some optimism and joy from Byron Scott 2 years ago. And then 3 years ago, they got the 7th pick, and at that point, they just need to stay in the top 10. So James Worthy was just kind of like, okay, great, they got a pick. They were hoping to go higher, but they still have a pick. So it's interesting and amusing to kind of see the different swing of emotions. So I'm sure that if they keep this, Magic's going to be jumping up and down and smiling, and Rob will certainly smile, but he'll probably be a little bit more even keeled than Magic is, but that's just how their personalities are. And if they don't, I'm sure there'll be a lot of outward emotions of disappointment, but then just knowing how those are, I'm sure by the time they gather themselves, they'll be ready to attack a different way.
Yep, and that's going to be crucial, that no matter what happens, they can find a path forward. Well, there it is. Mark Medina says that we are going to get the number 3 pick. Lakers are going to pick 3rd in the NBA draft. We'll see if that prediction comes true.
And I don't know if Laker fans are necessarily going to be happy with that. They might be like, "Oh, you should have said number 1," but at least they keep the pick.
Well, hey, you know what popped into my head, man? If they get number 3. How hard will Lonzo and LeVar Ball campaign to fall to 3?
Oh, I'm sure they'll try to dog their workouts with other teams.
All right. Well, hey, Mark, thank you so much for making the time to come on the show today. Really appreciate it, and appreciate all your work, of course, in providing Lakers fans with up-to-date news year-round.
All righty. Well, thanks so much.
So that was Mark Medina of the Southern California News Group. Always great to catch up with him. Fantastic conversation as usual. Now, next show, we're going to dive straight into the draft lottery. I've got Chris McGee of Spectrum Sportsnet coming on, and we are going to talk all about the lottery and everything that could go down there. And we'll also be, of course, hoping that the Lakers are able to keep their pick. That's going to about wrap things up for me today. You can find this show on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, the CLNS radio app, and of course, the fantastic LakersNation.com. My name's Trevor Lane, and this has been the Lakers Nation Podcast.